activity at the end. But what came up in our more recent conversations is, why don't we sunset the program altogether for 9th grade and look at the curriculum separately? Not saying we want 8th grade to end like Achievers. That's not unanimous support of the steering committee. So I want to be clear that there wasn't a big group huddle and everyone said yes. The student who's on the group really spoke very eloquently about what the program means to her, specifically with the student relationships. Because if you think about the identification process, some students are identified as early as 1st or 2nd grade. They go through a program for all of these years with this peer group. We know one of the great benefits of a gifted program is time with typical peers or like-minded peers. And then those relationships go away because you're in a big high school. So if we still want to really pay attention to providing that time and space, we did talk about potentially a club for students. So there's a regular network and time for them to come together more socially than anything else, because so few students have been accessing the program over time. We're starting to see some attrition in 8th grade, and then really in 9th grade, it's a small percentage of students relatively that end up going forward with the program. So that was the original recommendation. Right now, we do have the cuts in the budget are looking at the program not continuing next year. What that means is we would have the program continue as it is for next year at the middle school, and then we would be looking at changing the curriculum over time. The identification process is one of the other considerations that came from the report. At our last meeting, we turned this over to the steering committee, as this is going to be their charge, is to look at best practices in this area. So we're working that out at the moment. 2 things specifically. One of them is really looking at the identification of talents, because we know a best practice. Our program is really right now a gifted program. We haven't really called ours a gifted and talented program because we're looking at the academic portion more than we are talents. So they are exploring what are the areas of talent we might consider identification, and what are some best practices in doing that. We're also having conversations about, once students are potentially identified as talents, are we necessarily providing services, or are we making sure we're communicating with teachers so they can nurture those talents in given areas? For example, if someone's musically talented, artistically talented, is there a service provided with that, or is this how can teachers in the context of music and art classrooms really tap into that talent and bring it forward? The other piece that has been very challenging to manage is the off-year parent referrals. There are many off-year parent referrals. The gifted education teachers go through a process of evaluating students when it's not a year for the students to be screened. And it takes upwards of 6 hours per referral. And of the students that are referred on these off years, we have a range of, I would say, 8 to 12 or 14% of that population ends up getting identified. So what we want to look at is there a better way on those off years to respond to that? Because we have so much, our gifted teachers are spending so much time evaluating when they could actually be spending time delivering instruction and providing programs to students. That's the greatest value we have in the program we have, is when the teachers are working with students. So that's another piece that the steering committee is going to look into. And I know our gifted education teachers have been, I think that was the first request they made, and it came forth in the program evaluation as well. The other big piece was curriculum enhancement. A theme of the evaluation was the middle school curriculum specifically. I would say there was a relatively high level of parent satisfaction, specifically at the elementary school. And in the middle school, there were questions and concerns about the middle school program, as well as the middle school schedule. So that's where we really want to take some of our initial steps. The reason we haven't moved faster, it goes back to the schedule. We were waiting for that change to happen, but here we are 2 years later, and we haven't done that yet. So we need to move forward, even though we aren't quite there with the schedule. So professional development is a big piece in doing that. The district's worked with Holly Clark in the past on project-based learning. She was a keynote speaker for us about a year or two ago. So she's going to do some work not only with our gifted education teachers, but with other educators as well. So looking closely at the middle school curriculum with her. And then with her wisdom as well, talking about the possibility of that 8th grade culminating experience. Based on the conversations we've had, it's probably going to be helpful for us to not call a program Achievers and rename it and just place it in another school. I think it's an opportunity to rebrand, and developmentally, and the structure of the schedule does limit students' ability to access the program the same way, and the mentors the way that it's currently designed. And also looking at the National Association of Gifted Children standards and making sure that the curriculum and standards aligned. I don't have this bullet up here as well, but it's been there's been enough change in administration that we probably want to look at the program itself and the vision and the goals and what it's for, because that was all done before our district strategic plan and our mission, vision, core values. So we want to just do an alignment check with all of those things. So I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. So it seems like there's still a good chunk of work to be done on this.
There's a huge amount of work, and these items are just some of the primary considerations that were put in. So we have, this is probably a 5-year plan that the program evaluation gave us at minimum.
At minimum. Okay. So, I mean, I think that one of the major pieces is that middle school schedule. So when do you think that shift will take place? And when do you think we can hear more about what's being proposed?
I talked to Dr. Dahlstrom this morning, and she said she's hoping this spring to make those recommendations. And depending on the significance of what the schedule change would be, like if there are budgetary implications, we're looking out a fiscal year before those happen. That doesn't mean that we can't start making adjustments to the curriculum, and we'll make the adjustments again, should there be more time that students have access to the program.
Okay, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, Chris, and maybe you don't know yet, but the elective idea, because we don't really have electives at Middlesex.
We
so it's
don't.
just a
So
whole
that-
different animal.
So the initial schedule that was proposed by Shelley Summers in 2020, spring of 2020, looked at having elective opportunities for students so they can make some choice. And this was a way to add more opportunities for choice to students and not necessarily add a ton of FTE, because there is space to accommodate that. Space and schedules, but not space in the building. So that's the balance that we're trying to find. So we would have to have plenty of conversations of, it is not common for students to have complete choice with electives because there's guaranteed experiences, and it's not the middle school model. Like the middle school model of you have art, you have music, so this would be, especially looking at 7th and 8th grade, because I described the limitations of 6th grade. Students might have the guaranteed music or the guaranteed art, but there's also another space for them to choose something else.
Thanks.
Excuse me,
Mrs. Ryan?
Tara has her hand
Yeah.
raised.
Tara,
Hi, great. I also was questioning about the electives. And although I would have to say, if you're going to start offering electives, is there a reason why kids have to take, kids that are completely unartistic, that they have to take art, right? That someone may be more STEM based and would prefer to spend their time there? I mean, just a thought. I don't know if that's a statewide regulation or not. I probably should. Anyway, I have a couple questions. Talking about enrollment dropping, where is that dropping? Just at the high school and that 8th grade, or is it all K to 9?
There is I would say an initial drop moving from elementary to middle school, and then a larger drop during not only 7th to 8th grade, but I would say during the 8th grade year, as students are changing during 8th grade and the social dynamic changes. And then the largest one is the 8th to 9th grade.
Okay, so really it's mostly, as it's been for a long time, it's about the schedule and kids not wanting to miss out on that social time with friends.
Yes, and it's also usually male students that tend to
Yes.
drop more frequently than female students.
Right. I'm fine with the achievers at the high school situation and relooking at that. But I think we should also realize that over the past few years, it's been very inconsistent. I know there was a lot of drop this year. I believe it started out with 20 kids. There were 2 sections and a lot dropped from one section. And from what I hear, it wasn't very consistent between the two. So, and that program has been like that at the high school. I think part of the problem is it really hasn't had one teacher managing it for a really long time. So it's really been all over the place. So kids' experiences have been very different. The PD, is it also because you talked about the gifted teachers having to look at all these kids that are coming on off schedule? So is there going, and part of that is because the classroom teacher is not really able to identify it all, to kind of look and say like, oh, that kid should, be taking the test or being looked at for gifted. So is there going to be some PD for those regular ed teachers so that they know within the classroom that kid is hitting certain check marks that they should be looked at?
Yes, that's also I think it was one of the prioritized considerations from the report as well. So absolutely.
Okay, great. Sorry, I have so many questions. I see Genius Hour up there. I'm not sure how that is connected to the gifted. I know it's basically a project-based like Achievers, but it is mandatory for everyone in the school. I see how it's school-wide enrichment, but that's not looking at a specific set of students. So I'm not sure why that's up there.
Yeah, thank you for that. I meant to mention that. So one of the considerations that came from the report was, in addition to enhancing the gifted education program, what's deeply tied to the research, especially out of the Renzulli Center for Gifted Education, is enrichment for all. So that's an example of where we've addressed enrichment for all. So that's just a programmatic enhancement for the entire middle school. But ideally, those opportunities exist across the district. And enrichment for all, some places do enrichment for all in place of gifted education programming. I want to be clear that we are not looking at enrichment for all as a program replacement. That's in addition to.
Okay. And I think my last question is about how you are expanding or looking at different aspects such as talents when it comes to, and you mentioned a little bit that you're not sure how those students would be then serviced, because are you planning on bringing art into the gifted program? I'm just a little worried that if we're trying to reach every single little thing that someone may have, that the program's not really going to serve anyone.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there. I think the first step is to make sure that we are recognizing the talents that might exist within students and think about opportunities that we have to enhance those talents. And like I said, we don't need to necessarily provide specific services for them, but it doesn't mean that we can't work closely with those teachers who are aware that there are unique talents within that skill set. A simple example, like when you give students a music aptitude test at an early age, you might see things in their aptitude scores that they're not exhibiting at all on the day-to-day of their classroom participation. But once you know that, it gives some insight into how you might spend some time to try to tap into those talents in a different way. I don't think, and this is me just projecting, I don't think we would look at additional services for all of these things, because then I do think that the program loses some identity. But I do think it's important that we recognize talents that might exist within populations of students.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's it for me.
Mrs. Best, Julie.
Thank you. Chris, do we tend to identify, I think we do, students coming out of 5th grade. So we have a new group of IDEA students going into the middle school. So do those balance out? Like, do we end up having kind of a similar number of 5th grade IDEA students and 6th grade IDEA students because we lose some, but we gain some?
I think the number is still down a bit because enough students don't take it. I could look
Okay.
for sure, but I don't think that the number definitely does not increase.
Okay. And then for the curriculum, from my personal experience, I just wanted to share, having been a middle school IDEA mom for a while, my exposure to the curriculum was generally the 10 minutes in the library during open house night, and that was a lot to try to take in 10 minutes. So I'm sure you're looking at it from a variety of lenses, but the parent input piece, I would not have been able to speak eloquently about what I thought was great or not great about the middle school curriculum, because again, there was very limited exposure to it.
actually changed that this year.
Okay, so that's it.
For that reason.
Thank you. I used to leave that library like, what just, anyway. And then the last thing I wanted to ask, Chris, you had touched on this briefly, but could you just talk a little bit more about the middle school model, which is not about choice so much, it's about prescribed.
And so the middle school model, especially team-based models, it's designed so students are, especially in larger schools, they have a group that they travel with, a cohort, so to speak. So you might have 100 students that have the same math, English, science, social studies teacher. And they also tend to experience their unified arts in the same way as well. So middle school is a guaranteed experience. And to Tara's great question about, well, why does it have to be that way when it comes to art and music and all of these things? That's a discussion that we certainly need to have. I think the philosophy that grounds the middle school model is that we want to provide students with similar experiences so they're prepared to make a choice when the time is appropriate. So the question becomes, when are students ready to start to deeply explore areas of passion, which also ties into the reason the middle school curriculum, we're digging into the middle school curriculum. Gifted education is really about students exploring things that they care about most and diving deeply into what they want to learn more about. So choice and exploration and inquiry is a big part of what we're looking toward.
Okay, thanks.
Can you remind us what is required of a middle school student? What must they take throughout their day?
That's a really interesting question, because there isn't too much guidance as to what is required at the middle school. We don't really get into state requirements until the high school.
Okay.
So math, English. So I think about it as what prepares students for what they're required to take when they get to high school. And that's math, English, science, social studies, world language, and there's an arts requirement as well. The spirit of high school reform, when that originally came to be 10 years ago, about 10 years ago, I think we're 5 years late in implementation. It was just delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. It really was looking at trying to give more space for high school students to explore what they wanted to explore. But we've been battling the post-secondary experience, and expectations hasn't really changed.
Right.
So if you want students to have more opportunity for choice, but they are college bound, for example, there are certain things you have to do to prepare yourself appropriately for that. So that's the tension that continues to exist despite a desire for students to have more opportunity, not really doing the traditional path.
Right.
Part of the challenge there too is they're trying to expand the requirements and also open up opportunities, but they're still using the same old credit system. So one competes against the other.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, and there were wins and losses through that process, because at one point, if you remember, Christina, I think it was required 2 credits for world language, and then it became 1. So there's only 1 credit required for world language, but we know that most colleges want a minimum of 3 years, and not only 3 years, but 3 years taking the same language.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, that's definitely a tricky trickle down situation. I have a question about the off-year parent referral. So it's interesting that would you say 8 to 14% are actually identified as gifted? So is there a parent education piece that we could work on before the program shifts? Because I think, in this community of well-educated, type A parents, everybody, maybe not everybody, a lot of people think that their really smart kid is gifted, when in all actuality, there is a true definition of giftedness. So how can we help you guys to not have to do those 6-hour referral processes if not necessary?
So I will say that this year we also did a parent presentation, and we offered it in person and through Zoom, and we had a very, very large participation rate, and went through the process and what we even see and what it involves and kind of things to look out for. And we still had the same number of parent referrals.
Okay.
Yeah, and we actually have heard some things like parents have said they would like the data. So they want to know how the students do. The design of the assessments that we use for gifted identification. The scores don't tend to fluctuate. That's the nature of testing. So students are, as the years go on, students aren't more likely to be identified
Right.
because these are difficult tests to prepare for because they're not looking at academic achievement. They're looking at other things.
Tara, your hand is still up. Do you still have questions?
Yes, one question about, I'm wondering if, especially since it's more boys, I have my theory that it's just the lunch and pull out and socialization, but I'm wondering if there's any exit interviews done with these kids to see if there's something else going on as well.
I don't believe there are, Tara, but given the number that have dropped this year, and my experience with sitting alongside of this program evaluation, the most valuable part of that was talking to students through focus groups. And I think that might be an interesting focus group. I have a feeling they would be willing to sit and talk.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'd be
not-
curious.
Maybe not at their lunchtime, but I can
Yeah.
find
No.
them. I can find them another time.
Thank you.
Other questions? I can't see Dave. Dave, are you there? Do you have questions?
I'm still here. The only question I would have is regarding the 6-hour evaluation. Could you just speak, Chris, to what that 6 hours is composed of?
Julie can jump in on that. It's not 6 hours in one setting. It's several different assessments. So Julie can speak more to that.
Sure, we use the OLSAT, which takes about an hour, or an hour and a half. It's 2 sessions depending on the grade. We do a degree of reading power that also takes about an hour. We do a writing assessment. We do a Torrance test for creativity. There is a teacher piece. So each of those pieces, and especially for our younger students in 1st and 2nd grade, we break it up so that they're not all sitting in one session. So it's a lot of time of testing and of pulling kids out of the classroom for that.
Thank you.
Further questions on gifted education? Oh, Tara's got her hand up.
Just curious, being that don't they take the OLSAT? I said 1st, 3rd, 5th? Is that when they take the OLSAT?
3rd and 5th.
Just 3rd and 5th. Okay. So a lot of these parent recommendations, are they at the younger years? I'm just curious, because once you have your 3rd grade OLSAT, you kind of know how, and like Chris mentioned, they're fairly static, right? They don't change a lot, being that it's basically an IQ test. So
Yeah.
is it seen at the earlier ages?
Yes, a lot of 1st and 2nd grade.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Tranberg. We'll move on to Mauricio and World Language Update. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Ooh,
Hello.
great, it works. Thank you.
Thank you to the members of the Board of Education Curriculum Committee for giving me the opportunity to present an update on our secondary world language program and to share with you some plans for the program's future. Today, I will briefly review our department's thematic approach to instruction and provide you with an overview of how our curricula are structured. I will then present I will then present on the seal of biliteracy and move on to a report of proficiency assessment scores from last year. This week, we will begin our annual proficiency assessments in grade 8. They actually start today at MMS, and we'll continue with seal of biliteracy proficiency assessments in the high school in March. And then I will share an update on how we are progressing with the incorporation of new courses at MMS and DHS, and how we are preparing to bring on the courses approved in November for the 2023-2024 school year. And finally, a brief update on where we are with current and upcoming curricular revisions and an update on our international trips, my favorite part. So first, a thematic approach to curriculum. In the world language world, we call this the themes bloom. All across the United States, world language programs like ours are governed by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages standards for world language instruction. And 10 years ago, as programs sought to accelerate language instruction and open access for more students to study languages at a higher level, the College Board's AP program synthesized all of those standards into this Venn diagram for world languages. The diagram makes it easy for us to visualize what our students learn and categorize it into wider, broader themes that are all connected. 6 years ago, we here in Darien made the transition to each course exploring one theme per marking period. In this way, our students are able to take a deeper dive into the material over a longer period of time and truly master it. To illustrate this with an example, I'll use food. Where we previously had a 2-week unit on food as a superficial topic, where students were expected to master a ton of vocabulary words in 10 school days, we now have a 9-week thematic unit on contemporary life, where we explore how to make healthy food choices, how to describe food preferences, and the historic origins of ingredients used to make certain cultural dishes. And I shared this information in my update last year, and nothing has really changed, but I included it here just in case. So to that end, our curricula are structured in the order you see here. In addition to making a shift to thematic instruction 6 years ago, we also made a shift to backwards design, which put our department in a good place to move into EduPlanet right away. Our units begin with unit overview and supporting information for teachers. This is where we tell the story of a unit, the why behind what we teach, and provide notes for instruction. For example, our 6th grade curricula begin with a unit 0, which is intended to acclimate students to 5 days of language instruction at Middlesex, and more importantly, how to be an organized, independent middle school student in a French, Mandarin, or Spanish class that aims to speak in the target language for the whole class period and meets every day of the week. Then we list our essential questions and supporting questions, which act as a frame for the things students will learn. And by the end of each unit, students should be able to answer each of those questions using new linguistic skills they've acquired, and eventually take those skills with them into the next unit and in the next school year and beyond, what in the UBD world we call transfer goals. And then we list out acquisition goals, as commonly referred to as essential knowledge or a toolbox. And here is where we explicitly state everything the students will learn: vocabulary, grammar, and linguistic functions. So if you think back to your own time, perhaps in a world language class when you were in middle school or you were in high school, your classes were probably structured with this at the beginning. In a backwards design model, vocab and grammar are used to do something within the broader context of a theme. So to listen, to speak, to write, and to read with accuracy about what they're learning, and are not the main drivers of instruction. And and one more. And finally, our curricula end with links to resource folders and common assessments that are stored in Drive, and internal instruction notes where teachers memorialize notes about how to tweak lessons based on student performance and common assessments within a unit, and make recommendations for curricular shifts into the future. We have also now added our district and board goals and initiatives. So for example, Sealed by Literacy, Vision of the Graduate, and a mastery-based diploma. So all of those standards are infused, and we add those as we add more content and curricula into EduPlanet. And all of these things that you see here are currently summarized on the Curricula at a Glance public-facing documents, which are on our department's curriculum webpage, and will eventually make their way onto EduPlanet. And I'll share more about what this means for our department in EduPlanet as I review the new courses. To transition quickly to Sealed by Literacy, the Sealed by Literacy is awarded to seniors at graduation. Darien High School has been part of the state of Connecticut Sealed by Literacy program since its inception in the 2017-2018 school year, with the class of 2018. And to prepare for today, I played back my presentation from last year before I had these numbers, and I realized I made quite a bold statement. I said, I predict that this year we will have the highest number of SEAL earners since adopting the program in 2017, not only in number of students earning the SEAL, but also in the number of languages represented on our list. And I was right. Last year, we awarded the SEAL to 137 seniors, the highest since the program began, and in 7 different languages. And this is actually among the highest in the DERG, even though many schools are larger than ours. As part of our desire to cast a wider net, we award the SEAL not only to students who learn a language in our world language program, but also to students that are heritage speakers of other languages at home. And we're able to capture this information through a school-wide survey at DHS, where students self-identify as home language speakers and opt in to testing. And both our language learners and heritage speakers need to complete 2 steps to earn the SEAL. So the first step is completing the world language portion. In grades 10, 11, or 12, students must pass a language proficiency exam, and we test our students' proficiency in these grades as part of data collection and our general program. So the assessment serves a double purpose. We don't need to test them again and again and again. And the second is meeting the requirements for the English portion, which for us is to just meet the English requirements to graduate from high school. And no additional testing or data collection is necessary for this part of the SEAL. And if you'll indulge me in my charts for a moment, I would like to transition to our yearly stamp assessment and the presentation of completed scores from last year. And when I gave my program update last February, we had begun testing at the middle school and high school and had preliminary data, but it wasn't complete. And as I mentioned before, we begin testing today at Middlesex and at DHS in March. So the standards-based measure of proficiency, or the STAMP as we call it, is a computer adaptive assessment that calibrates a student's proficiency level in 4 skill areas. Students can score novice low, mid, high, intermediate low, mid, high, and advanced low, mid, high. And you'll see in the upcoming slides that in some places I put range in parentheses, and this means that our students scored within the range of low, mid, or high in that given level. So these are our scores from Middlesex, and despite COVID, these are the highest scores our 8th grade students have earned since adopting the assessment in 2018. And it not only highlights our students' efforts and their commitment to studying a language in middle school, but also my colleagues' effort as well, who have these students in their classes for the entire 3 years that they're in middle school. And in both languages, in French and in Spanish, our students are meeting or exceeding the target that we place for them. So for students in Middlesex, our goal is to get them out of the novice range as quickly as possible. In productive skills such as speaking and writing, it is expected that our students will reach novice high and begin approaching intermediate by the time they leave in 8th grade. And the reason why students are able to score the way they do is because they have language every day in middle school, starting in 6th grade. And in Spanish in particular, Yolanda's like, why are they so high? Well, in Spanish, they start in kindergarten. And the data from DHS, which is now complete, represents a composite score of all juniors and seniors currently enrolled in these languages. So it was current at the time. The numbers are different now as students move on through the program and take different courses, but this was the last year's juniors and seniors. So seniors earning the seal of biliteracy and current seniors at DHS. And an overwhelming majority, again, score completely and comfortably in intermediate and into the advanced range. So to earn the seal of biliteracy, you need a 5 on all parts of the exam. A 5 is an intermediate mid, a 5 or higher. And I won't go too much into this aspect of language learning because I could be here for several days talking about it and why, but most of them are intermediate. Intermediate is the level at which any language student, whether they start in kindergarten or whether they start in college, intermediate is where a language learner will spend most of their time. At this level, students are learning to not only communicate in all timeframes, past, present, and future, but they also begin incorporating cultural and idiomatic expressions and also start to perfect pronunciation, which takes a very long time to break through into advanced. And on this slide, you'll also notice that Spanish learners are getting into the advanced range in all 4 areas because of how much time they spend in our program. So just to pause here really quickly, where I mentioned previously that I include range in parentheses, that means that, for example, in speaking in Spanish, if we look at 73%, in most 73% of students, juniors and seniors, scored intermediate high or into the advanced range, so intermediate, low, mid, high. But most of them, you'll see intermediate high, and in French, all comfortably in intermediate, and in listening comprehension, which is interesting because listening comprehension is typically where language learners struggle the most. They're comfortably in intermediate and also reaching advanced, very similar to listening in Spanish. And in Mandarin, and the reason why ALIRA is up there, ALIRA is the test that Latin learners take. It only has reading and writing for obvious reasons. You can't speak. I mean, I guess you could speak Latin if you really tried, but we don't assess their speaking proficiency, and we also don't assess their listening proficiency. But again, comfortably in intermediate. In Mandarin, this is exactly what we would expect, novice high to intermediate range. Mandarin is a level 4 language. It's doesn't have our alphabet. It's a tonal language. Word order is different than most languages that have Latin as a stem. So this is what we would expect a typical high school student to achieve. Students, the Mandarin Chinese, as I mentioned before, is a level 4 language, among the most challenging languages to learn for non-native speakers. So we would expect students to begin approaching intermediate after 3 or 4 years. And thanks to the stamp in Mandarin, we're able to make recommendations such as bringing Mandarin to Middlesex. And in 2 years, when we assess our first group of 8th graders, we'll be able to more accurately predict their proficiency growth into the future. And just a plug on behalf of Dr. Dahlstrom and myself, thank you for supporting our program's growth with the addition of Mandarin 6. And I'll have more about that later, but it's incredible what they're able to do in that course. New courses running this current school year. So I'll start with AP Spanish literature at DHS. I won't go into too much detail here because you're already familiar with it from the proposal from last year. And also as a former teacher of this course, I could go on and on and on about why it's amazing. So I'll try and control myself. This course is the equivalent of a 4th semester university course, as evidenced by the literary genres shown here. It's almost exactly like the AP English literature course, the main difference being that it is obviously taught in Spanish, and it comes with a prescribed reading list from the College Board. 2 obvious things are happening in this first year that we have this course, developing a curriculum outline that's in compliance with the College Board audit, and also preparing students for their test in May. But within the classroom, students participate in literary discussions, Socratic seminars that prepare them to write about the literature that they're studying. And next year, we predict that we'll offer 2 full sections of the course, given the large number of AP Spanish language students we have this year, which is the prerequisite for that class. And in the new Mandarin 6 course at Middlesex begins with fundamentals of character writing by hand and on the computer, and in Pinyin, which is the romanization of Chinese characters, and hones in on proper pronunciation and understanding tones. And I also won't go into too much detail here because you've seen the proposal for that as well, but I do want to highlight what I've seen in the classroom. And, you know, when I walk in, I walk around, I ask students what they're doing and what they're learning, why they're learning it, if they understand it. And they are able to tell me in English, and despite their small stature, I mean, the only thing you would notice is, you know, how small the students are, but they're able to speak Mandarin and write in Mandarin, and when our teacher's up at the board and explains to students why characters go where they go, they're able to understand it and they put it in their notebook. And Mandarin instruction is very deliberate. And it's just amazing seeing the difference it makes when they start so young and what they're able to do after such a short amount of time. And I look forward to watching them dive deeper into the fundamentals of the language as they progress into the following years. And I'll have more about that in the coming slides. So 2 new courses for the coming school year at DHS, Hispanic Culture Through Film and Hispanic Culture Through Art. I presented the proposals for these a few months ago. So just the broad strokes today, they're both Spanish 5 classes, can be taken in any order depending on student interest, and allow students to do 3 things. So 1, they can continue their language study without taking an AP course. They can take an additional year of language before AP Spanish language, or take a 4th year course of a language after AP Spanish language if they choose to not go into AP Spanish literature. And we look forward to developing our students' speaking and writing skills in these courses, further developing interdisciplinary connections through the lens of film and the arts, and giving our students choice. This is really a great way to give them some choice in content. And as you know, we're also bringing on American Sign Language 1 at DHS next year, and moving on to the next phase of Mandarin at Middlesex with Mandarin 7. At my new course presentation in November, I was asked to give some predictors for enrollment for these courses. And while I don't know exact numbers because we just began with registration at both schools, I predict the following, and hopefully I'm right, just like I was right about SEAL biliteracy last year. But for American Sign Language, we predict one section of 18 to 22 students, which is the average number of students in each class at DHS. And again, this is pure speculation, just based on emails I've received, student interest, questions from parents and students, and conversations with counselors who sort of have the pulse on what kids are interested in and what they're registering for. And after we get hard numbers, I'll be able to project outward into the future as they show interest in continuing. So hopefully this is like learning any language, committing and continuing and spending time is really important. And in November in 2021, Dr. Dahlstrom and I presented a memorandum to the board with a phased rollout of Mandarin at MMS in years 1, 2, and 3. So as we move on to the following years, this would be year 2. Based on the success of the first year, because it's gaining so much attention, we predict 2 or 3 sections of Mandarin 6 for next year. And then the students that are currently in Mandarin 6 will move on to Mandarin 7 with the 29 students that are currently enrolled in the program. So they move on to this class. And curriculum writing and revisions that are upcoming. At the end of the school year and in the summer at Middlesex, Spanish 6 and 7, French 7 and 8, and Mandarin 6 and 7. And at DHS, French 3, French 3 honors, Spanish 3 honors, and our new Spanish 5 culture through the arts class. And we've already completed French 6 and Spanish 8 at Middlesex, and French 2 and 2 accelerated, and Spanish 4 and 4 honors at DHS. And an update on our international trips. We leave for Ecuador and Galapagos in 2 months. So I'm really excited about that. You'll see me again in March for 2024 when I propose those trips. We project those about 1.5 years out, just so we can get students enrolled and make it affordable for families and really publicize these experiences. So I'd like to end with a photo of our students and chaperones in Sevilla in Spain last April. It was a scorching hot day on top of Las Setas, one of the tallest structures in the city, and the only place over the course of the 10 days we were abroad that was large enough to get us all in one single photo. And you'd think that a group this large would attract a lot of attention, but to be honest, we didn't. Not only is Spain accustomed to young tourists, but our students really made a sincere effort to speak Spanish, followed social norms and customs. We did have dinner before 10 p.m. That was the only one we didn't really follow, but they really made us proud by blending in and doing as Spaniards do. And I've traveled with students abroad several times in my career, but of all those experiences, this was the best one I've ever had. The largest group I've ever traveled with. Everyone thought we were nuts for going. It's a pandemic. They thought we were crazy, but we did it. And two statements stick out in my mind. I didn't think I'd want to study abroad in college, but now I want to study here. And it took me 2 days, but all the Spanish in my brain finally came out. So the trip was several years in the making and in the waiting, and because of your support and community support and student interests, my amazing colleagues that believed in the program and wanted to experience it for themselves, gave up their time to travel with us. It finally happened and the program's off the ground and with eyes on the future. So I look forward to coming back in March to do 2024. And that's it. So thank you. And I will take questions.
Thank you, Christina. How many people do you have going to the Galapagos and to Italy this summer?
22 to Galapagos and 24 to Italy. Yeah. Students. And then we have
Students, right,
chaperones.
right.
Yeah.
Questions for Christina about world language? Tara, do you have anything? I'm looking at you, but yeah, there you go. There's your hand.
Sorry, not really a question. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and I really appreciate the additional AP. You know, as we spoke earlier, you know, it's hard for students at the high school to really take electives and do what they want because colleges do expect a certain amount of APs. And in the past, you know, even the 2 English APs didn't exist, 6 years ago? So it's always been very math science based. And for kids that aren't that math science person, it's really not fun to get all those APs for colleges. So I really appreciate this.
Yep. Thank you.
Julie.
Thank
You.
What just happened? Can't hear anything again. I'm not sure what happened.
The BOE booth is muted.
We're good.
Can you hear us now?
Can you hear us?
Okay. Thank you, Michelle.
So yes to all of those. So most students at DHS take a world language. I think the last time I checked it was like 1,100. I'm currently enrolled. I don't know. I didn't dive that deep into the data, although I will now because I'm a nerd about that kind of stuff. But most take a world language. Most take it for 3 or 4 years. And the reason, you know, I've been here for a little while now and I see, you know, the numbers go up and up and up. And I always have the conversation like, why are the numbers growing up? Because we have the same number of kids. It's not that we have more students physically coming into the high school. It's just that they stay. And they stay because they see, you know, the tangible effects of what they can do when they stay for that long. And yes, there's seal of biliteracy at the end. There are AP classes. There are level 5 classes. There are trips. There are all these great things that you can do. But when you're somewhere and you hear someone speaking the language that you're learning and you understand it, that's like, oh my God, what I'm doing in class is doing something for me. So they stay for a long time.
They also stay because they can, and that's through Christina's advocacy for those 2 5 classes. You're not going to see those in most places. So those are there because students need a place to go because they are completing the AP course, as many of them as juniors.
Yes, most of them as juniors now.
And they don't have to do that in order to access these classes. They might there's so many pathways for them to stay engaged in the program and not feeling like if I don't take an AP, then I have to either take another language or not take anymore. And that's through Christina's advocacy and program design.
So it seems like our language program is quite robust, especially with the addition of Mandarin at the middle school and hopefully with the addition of ASL. Is in relation to our DERG, are there other, how do we fare in terms of our offerings? And are there things that you wish we could offer but don't have the space, time, budget?
I would say that it's about the same, but in many ways better. Considering the size, it's a relatively large high school, but it's not that big. Considering the size, we do a lot and we have a lot of students enrolled. So there are schools in our DERG that have an ASL program. There are schools in our DERG that start Mandarin in the younger grades. There are schools in our DERG that don't have elementary world language, but then they also don't have the results that we have on CLFI literacy. And that's really not to say like, oh, everyone takes Spanish. It's students have a choice. When they get to middle school, they can change. When they get to high school, they can change. But the point is they're accustomed to being in a world language classroom. And so they know what it takes to learn another language as well. As far as wishes go, I can't really say that I wish for something different or for something more. I wish and I hope that I will continue to have the support to make changes as things evolve and recommendations as things change. But I would say we're in a really, really good place. And in our DERG, we have a PLC of the DERG A. We call it A+ because we include Greenwich and Norwalk as well in our PLC. And we're constantly sharing ideas and numbers and what's going on in your program. And that's really how our program grows, because we see other schools doing really good things and we say, let's see if we can make that happen also. Yeah.
There's one more question. If you could look back into your crystal ball real quick.
Mhm.
For ASL, do you have any feeling on, are those students who are not taking a world language who will be coming into the world language program?
Some of them will be. Yep. Some of them will be who, especially when we take them in ninth grade, many students at Middlesex who don't currently take a language because of the program that they're in will opt in to that program and hopefully stay. And their staying in it will allow us to project out into the future. I also predict that we'll have students at DHS who will continue on with the language that they're currently taking and add ASL, which will make for a really interesting mix of students, ages and ability levels, which will be great too. But I won't be able to look that deeply into my crystal ball without first having, a group that I can work with. Yeah.
And I did want to say thank you for the Spanish 5 courses, because having a couple of high schoolers as they register, for classes each year, you're looking for a balance, right? Not every student is looking to take 5 AP classes at a time, so to speak. So it's great to have options, both AP and not.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Adler.
Yeah, I just wanted to, one obviously recognize Christina's leadership in this capacity, but I also just want to, and I know the board agrees to and have supported this, but these international trips and international experiences and travel experiences, there's no greater opportunity you get to learn something as to travel together and to bond together as a group as you hustle through airports. But I want to just recognize, because they don't come without commitments, planning, commitment to the actual experiences. And then many times our staff, including Christina, have to bear with, and our students too, what we all do with inconveniences for travel, from loss of luggage to having to stay with students who are sick and so on and so forth. So often their experiences maybe even extend beyond the time period. So I just want to recognize those and support them, and appreciate the board support for these every year, because I think they're an integral part of the actual program and experience.
It's exciting. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
Further questions? Tara, are we good? Good. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to our third agenda item, which is public comment. Michelle.
Good morning. Anyone in person would like to participate? Please step to the podium. You have 3 minutes to comment. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good morning. My name is Caitlin Cahill and I live at 27 Devon Road. I am the advocacy chair for Darien Advocates for Education of the Gifted. On behalf of DAEG, we would like to thank the administration for the thoughtful review of the IDEA program and considerations for programmatic improvements. Our students in grades 2 to 9 derive tremendous value from the program, and we appreciated hearing more about how to make it even better for our gifted learners. We plan to review this presentation and solicit feedback from our families for a collective response. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'm here. Sarah Bortel, 22 Brushy Hill Road. 2 quick comments. One is just on Latin. I know there's other schools in the DRG that do offer an AP option for that. And I was just wondering if there's any consideration kind of in the future as more Latin students move through. So that's thought 1. Thought 2, I just thought of a minute ago when we were talking, Julie, that question about ASL and your comment about taking it like an addition, just thinking of it as an elective. I don't think that really in the other presentations kind of came up, that the idea of students taking 2 language and just how is it a full semester? Is it a full year? Just thinking like, how would that work? It was the first time I've been in this room many times, and just thinking of it in that vein, not just someone coming in and taking it, but the idea that people would be taking it in lieu of another elective. It's just something that I thought was interesting.
Go right ahead.
Good morning. My name is Michael Cantwell. I have 2 kids, one in 7th grade at MMS and one in Tokenique. I wanted to thank you again for the work on the gifted program. It's been something that we didn't have at our last school and we're very happy to have here. It was one of the reasons we came here. So thanks for the continued work on that program. A couple times it came up earlier about competing priorities and time pressure on schedules. And I was wondering, just given how important that is and how limited that time is, if anyone has actually looked and done a study on a per grade basis as to how much time children are spending on specific priorities, how much time is being spent on math versus how much time is spent, having a healthy lunch, having physical activity, having time to study independently, having time to meet with a teacher. There's a lot there. I sat down recently with my daughter's schedule and went through how much time are you spending here and there? And I found a lot of time was being intended in one area and then redirected into something else. So I said, oh, flex. So what did you do in flex? Oh, well, that was what I found out was SEL. Oh, so when did you have time to make that up? So that never came up. Also during the same week, I found out that she got pulled out of science class. She got pulled out of math class to attend a program that was about SEL. I think it was an artist, probably a very nice program. But if I had the choice, I wouldn't have pulled her out of math and science class to do that program. So I'm asking if we could take a deliberate, careful look at how kids are spending their time. I think some of these things get thrown in at the last minute. We have somebody has a great idea and it gets thrown into the agenda, but we don't really look at what's being given up. Either that or it's deliberate, and it means that we should have a more careful and open dialogue about how time is being spent. We all do this in our daily lives. Sometimes when we look back, we said, well, geez, if I had that week to do over again, I wouldn't have spent that much time doing this. I would have spent more time doing that. So I'm both asking and volunteering. If we need help to do that, I'm glad to volunteer. I'll, provide some personal time if we want to, however you want to do it. But I think it clearly needs to be done. I've listened to a lot of these meetings and nobody's ever said, well, we have this much time for this area, and this is why we can or cannot add this additional program, or this is why this program is going to get bumped. It seems, simple just to see, because I was surprised a lot when I looked at my middle schoolers' 7th grade schedule, a lot of time being spent in places where, some things being prioritized over others. That's really the main point. So thanks again. And really, I mean it. If I can help, I would be glad to. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody, for your comments. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, no. we
Oh,
haven't
sorry,
done
there's
online.
people online. Sorry, I can't see if there's anybody there.
Sartori, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, this is Clara Sartori. I just wanted to ask about the gifted program, a couple of things. One, you mentioned the OSAT and the fact, I think somebody said the scores don't change all that much. But then during the presentation, you also mentioned that there's a pretty good influx of students into the program between 5th and 6th grade. So I guess I wondered, are there different things that happen for students between 5th and 6th grade that maybe make them eligible for the program and that aren't reflected in a change in their scores? So that's one question. I wondered if maybe that could be part of something you report on later on. And also the Johns Hopkins Talent Search, does the program identify or pick up students who might be interested in that? And are there students who aren't in the gifted program who also might have test scores or other qualifying factors that might allow them to participate in the Hopkins program? Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thanks, Clara. Sorry to overlook you.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, now may I have a motion to adjourn? Julie, seconded by myself. And we are dismissed. We are adjourned. Sorry, I'm my old teacher. You're dismissed. Thanks, everybody.